Greetings, colleagues. My name is NATALIA MOSEYCHUK. We were expected to have a mysterious guest. On your right, you can see him. This is head of the main intelligence directorate, General Budanov. Wherever you feel more comfortable. Thank you very much indeed for carving out the time and taking part in this panel discussion. Certainly, everyone is having different thoughts about tomorrow's meeting in the United States. Everyone is expecting results, and the first question will deal with what we can expect from tomorrow's meeting: sanctions, weapons, or peace deal. Well, let me put it this way. Everyone is expecting some sort of a miracle. We are going to expect everything at once. Lately, I've been joking after what has happened with Hamas and Israel, is that it's more easy to strike a peace deal between Palestinians and Israelis than between us and Russians. Well, you're right. In terms of definitions, the conflict and our war seems to be smaller compared to Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but actually that's not true. In historical terms, we have been at war with Russians for centuries. And as opposed to Palestinians with Israelis, they had peace periods. Talking from an economic standpoint, about some aspects of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Well, by the way, how many minutes do you have for the conversation? Well, 20 minutes should be enough. Let's talk about the economic aspects in particular, because oftentimes we hear about our enemy that it's being exhausted, that its military capabilities are wearing out. But still, we are hearing controversial opinions that aid is coming from several countries to it. So, could you please tell us what are the real capabilities of Russians to continue the war? Let us start by saying that any long-term war is not going to be beneficial to any country, and that we have seen it throughout history. So it's true that for Russians it's increasingly difficult. But the question is, how critical is that impact of the war? You have outlined many of the factors yourself. Regrettably, that's not what we would like to expect. They have a real margin of power to continue. They are feeling the economic problems. They are making themselves felt, but that's not the level of socio-economic problems that can make them change their strategic vision of the world. The fuel crisis. Today, Moscow Times, and I read this newspaper because both liberal and enemy sources are necessary. So Moscow Times published an article saying that oil revenues of Russia has decreased to a record low level after Ukrainian attacks on oil refineries. So how are these attacks influencing the capabilities of Russian army? Well, you also told me about oil sanctions. That's a peculiar phase. Our attacks have been more influential than the sanctions. That's the mathematical truth. The direct results of the hits have been more beneficial than the sanctions that have been introduced so far. That's a very uncomfortable truth, because it brings us to another conclusion. Obviously, what is being done is not enough. I mean, in terms of sanctions, it's not sufficient. And if it continues this way, it's not going to have a tangible impact to change the outlook on the Russian Federation. But taken together with what we are doing, it's going to yield a result, and it's already yielding a result. As we have said in the esteemed quote-unquote publication, they are talking about it. I heard an opinion that for the first time, Europeans and possibly Americans are betting on ending the war by sanctions. And many experts, military experts and politicians from South, from Asia, do not believe that the war can be ended, the modern world war can be ended in this way. Well, I am taking a middling opinion. Sanctions are not going to make Russians end the war, but taken together, it can be a useful means. But it's a question of the quality of sanctions. When everyone is talking that the entire civilized world is no longer buying Russian oil and gas, it's not true, first of all, if I'm being frank. And secondly, the much publicized statement that everyone in Europe, almost all, has given up on Russian gas, it does not take into account the LNG, where Russians are exporting 42% more than last year. So we have sectoral sanctions and we have very limited sanctions. So if we do not lift those limitations, the aim of those sanctions will not be achieved. During this war, we heard the phrase that Ukraine is fighting with one hand tied behind its back. Talking about attacks on Russian oil refineries, are we still fighting this way? Or so this is one part of the question. And then another one, I'm eager to know, why have we started working so intensively against Russian oil refineries? Well, talking about oil refineries, we use our assets. 99% of those assets are ours in terms of military strikes. Talking about fighting with your hand behind your back, I'm prone to believe that this is the correct description of what is happening. But we have our own production. We would like to have more, of course. It's never enough, but we have it. And our own domestic production has enabled us to use our own military assets the way we want them to be used. And it's yielding the result, referring once again to the Moscow Times publication. And the enemy itself is recognizing that it's having problems, and it's the best possible assessment of our actions. How influential is Washington on our strategy? The Washington division of the Communist Party is on our side, like we used to joke in the Soviet times. Well, okay. In this regard, Ursula von der Leyen, from the European section of the party, she is the author of the steel porcupine strategy. This phrase, you can take it differently when someone tells you to become a steel porcupine, but if you use this kind of phrase in this concept, what is our place? Are we advancing? Are we treading water? Or do we have a different concept? You know, at the end of 2022, early 2023, some sort of this concept, that vision, I would say, was proposed, and steel porcupine is just a vision, not a concept. And it used to be called the Israelization of Ukraine. Everyone talked about it. Some time has passed, and now they're calling it steel porcupine. I would answer this question differently. For better or worse, our society will have to recognize that an absolutely peaceful life for the foreseeable future is not possible. I do not mean that we are going to be at war forever, but rather we have to be able to repel the attacks at every moment. We have to be ready for it. That's a challenge. And the challenges also are also hiding our opportunities. You can talk about hedgehogs, porcupines, or other animals. It all depends on the meaning of these words for us, and that's an open question. Is it still open, considering we are at war? How can we be certain? Well, we are definitely a steel porcupine already, but what happens next? That's the question. And it directly depends on the economic development, because any such vision is going to require a huge amount of money. The degree of us being able to implement it, well, it requires collective effort. Are any obstacles, limitations possible in our advancement to this vision of steel porcupine? For instance, from the side of a peace deal, how dangerous is it? Do you expect it to have specific items saying that our defense industry will be limited? Let me reiterate it. Talking about the defense industry in a broader sense, any such vision, it's the question of technology and cost. If you have a powerful economy, you can become a porcupine, a hedgehog, any sort of animal. But if the economy is weak and you do not have money, you can have dreams about anything. But a powerful economy has to start from growth, right? Do you see the political will? Is it formed? Do we have the vision, strategy? Does the world have the vision or strategy to Ukraine? I know that you do not like when I'm taking away the agency from Ukraine. Right you are. You have already corrected yourself. Everything is in our hands. No one's going to do our job for us. There is no miracle, no magic, miracle worker. No one's going to bring it to us on a pretty tray. And no one's going to send the trespasser to prison in no time. So I think that after this war is over, we have to start a transition from the raw materials strategy to having at least a first stage of processing in our economy. That's a completely different value added, because economic miracle is impossible in a raw materials economy. We are going to have a porcupine which is having a limp in its leg at best. Well, that's not fortunate. So, General, no one has ever resolved our problems for us. Neither Rothschilds nor Rockefellers. Nothing is happening of that sort behind our backs, right? Alright, the bets are rising. Well, different world players have their own intentions and plans. It's normal. If they do not, that means that the territory is simply not interesting, and that's not a good sign, I would say. Everything depends on us. You can use someone's advice, you can follow somebody, you can impose your will on somebody, like an ultimatum. That's also an option. But you have to understand that we have everything. Ukraine is a country of opportunities, and no one's going to do this for us. No. Or if somebody does, it's not going to be much different from the Russian vision. Russians have come here with weapons. You can impose your will on Ukraine even without weapons. I don't think that Ukraine needs it. By the way, we are recording this conversation, and I think it will be published somewhere in the internet. I know that our viewers, after my conversations with General Budanov, tell me that they listened to it for 3 times. So you will also have the chance to listen to it again, because many people like to read between the lines. Just recently, the Russian government agreed on a bill letting Putin to use reservists without announcing mobilization in anti-terrorist operations in military conflicts, including abroad. Mr. Budanov, these are 2 million people. Russians are acknowledging it. So where do you think they will apply these 2 million servicemen? Well, you say 2 million. Well, that's an imaginary mobilization resource. We have it too, but the reality is different. That's the first thing. The second thing is the mode. This is opening the door to partial mobilization. You have to understand it. Why is this happening? The answer is perfectly clear. Because Russians are suffering irreparable losses. They keep rising the salaries for troops. But when they are taking such steps, obviously it's not going to make up for the losses. A year ago, I think I was asked the question, how's the situation going to unfold? And I told that by summer they will have enough resources, financial, human, technological, and then the problems will start to surface. It will not mean that Russians will tumble down, but they will face a choice whether to continue, whether to stop, to announce mobilization or not. The first step has already been done. Everything is unfolding in a very predictable scenario. The problem is that it's just continuing. Is the situation on the border with Estonia predictable? Can you predict that the Belarusian army will be in the readiness mode? Unfortunately, I have to tell you that it's possible. That's all I can say. So the war can spill to other countries. Right now, not. Geographically, in a few years, I think the maximum probability is that, yes, it will expand. So now we will have those hybrid attacks with drones, right? Yes, the statistics keeps growing this way. Estonians told you this. Well, they know everything. Don't you like Estonians? Well, I treat them with immense respect. That's why I'm honoring them and saying that this is true. So, coming back to your question, I have this map. And every day I keep adding some developments, some events in certain countries on this map. And when you look at it, it becomes abundantly clear what's happening. Because all of us have seen it in various forms at the end of 2013, early 2014. The same happened, only that we did not have drones. Everything else is the same, starting from sabotage acts, ending with anti-national actions, because countries are very different, anti-nationalist actions, I would say. Pro-Russian calls to changing government because it's taken the wrong direction, etc. When you look at this map, everything becomes abundantly clear. It's a repetition of what has happened before, and unfortunately, the Russians are good at it, at this practice. I did not have this question, but now I have to ask it when you say that it's happened before. Latvia has approved a bill, according to which people who do not speak the Latvian language have to leave the territory of Latvia. Is this a Latvian plan, or do they think this is a Latvian plan? I will refrain from answering this.
So, in regards of the events unfolding, drones, airports already blocked and collapsed in Europe, to what extent Europeans are close to understand that military alliance, which President Zelensky was talking about half a year ago, it has to be created? To what extent they understand? Well, it's a rhetorical question, probably, to what extent they understand. I will reply in a different way. They will have to understand that one way or another, but they will force with that reality. They would be faced with that reality. We are Ukrainian citizens, so we should think about role and place of Ukraine in that, in our realities, when the threat to Europe, the major threat, is seen from the eastern flank. Any similar alliance or union without Ukraine, that's a dead, burn creature. It's not going to work, both from geographical standpoint and from pure military standpoint. So excluding Ukraine is not going to work. If someone believes that they can cope on their own, let them try. That would be the same ending when the similar thoughts comes to mind. So there is at least uncertainty, to be politically correct. Uncertainty that things that you have will save you. Well, being on that level of transparency, non-planned, but being someone who read Prokhanov, I have to confess that I read and follow some enemies publications and a recent book about Prigozhin, where Putin is called as some Leonidovich Troyevidov. If you have not read or you're afraid to confess, but I think it's worth knowing things like that. So the book had such a hypothetical situation being described, and obviously all these events on Russian-Ukrainian war, that includes Africa, by the way, has a bit of biographical moment of Prigozhin. Are you sure that he So, well, why won't you complete your question? Well, you said that you have a bit more time, so I allow myself. So coming back to serious. So while Europeans are still on their way of understanding, and Ukraine should not only be included, but should be a lead in that process. So let's model the situation, the worst case scenario. Do they understand, do they comprehend that when Ukrainians, Belarusians and Russians go together, they march towards Europe? Look, let's be honest. That's a very long theory from the past, which been written and placed long time ago. Whether this is valid, the question is absolutely rhetorical. Unfortunately, the history may demonstrate that yes, this theory is very well perceived and seriously convinced in it by many people from leading officials and authorities from Russia, because according to that theory, they will fail without Ukraine. Unless three Slavic nations would come together, nothing special and serious would come true. So these are some sort of very deep-rooted, not strategies, but deep-rooted reasons of things that are unfolding today. In fact, many believe in that theory. Whether Europeans realize that there is such a theory and sometimes it did work, I can confirm that yes, many of those are aware, and it's rather the question about their conclusions from that. Someone would start saying, why should we help we will just put them in a better condition, and then they will join Russians and Belarusians. That's absolutely invalid thinking, and it may lead to the deconstruction of Europe. Another conclusion is very simple: make everything not to happen of that sort. So it means immediate direct support and aid to Ukraine. So investing into Ukraine, helping Ukraine, that's the contribution to their respective national security by their welfare. That is very painful subject, because in fact that theory does exist. Well, if you are also interested in strategy, I do advise to read the imperial ambitions that prevail among enemy. That is something, trust me, I did read that. That's why I'm telling you that I know what I'm saying. Thank you. I just can imagine that what people could put in comments to that video. You know, you named me the author. Let me reply the other contemporary author to consider. Dugin recently expressed himself very well reasoned. We will come to peace sometime later, and those who caused that, we will go against them. The question is whether Ukraine needs that. Obviously not. If we're clear with that, we have to do everything possible so these theories would become invalid. Let's not do that, or the disaster, the catastrophe would happen. So, current Kiev International Economic Forum includes the future of Ukraine in unfolding uncertain defense and security environments. So what should be the role and place of Ukraine in the world map? That's the constant question, our role and place in the world. When as soon as we'll find the answers to these questions, well, it's just a basic question to Russians, to be or not to be. Well, maybe we just look in a strange way. And still, role and place in this world. Well, it's not my type of question, let's be honest. None of the individuals is able to comprehend. I can share my personal thoughts, but I think it would be incorrect. But I can tell you, the key, even if we make mistakes, or the answer would be of sort that someone would not really enjoy, we should produce a grand strategy and identify our vector. Where should we advance? Not having a final end state, any actions would be meaningless. That might be some situational outcome that may cause a surprise among someone, but few years after, that would be multiplied by zero. Grand strategy. We need that, and we don't have it. Whether the world may face the new race of armament, it's already going on. It's too late to comment. Just see the military parade in China or in North Korea. It's absolutely fully unfolding now. Well, if it goes on, then someone needs that. Sometime that should fire and fly. Do you think that Chinese parade is a bit out of date? No, I won't say that. Unfortunately, I'm aware about the technical parameters of that equipment. It is not out of date. It is a very, very progressive equipment that bears a significant level of threat and danger. And I do wish we would never counter that equipment in the war fighting. So are they ready to the war because of parade? Parade is just one of the forms of a soft influence over the environment. That's the demonstration of power capabilities and the military capacities. Look what we have, such a terrible things. We're ready. Don't mess with us. Might be aware whether Xi Jinping is going to stay. Well, he's not left yet, that's for sure. Global crisis. They are not only demonstrate that something goes wrong or some nations are at the edge of disaster, but that's also the push for the development, especially after the wars. Some nations do the quantum jumps. What's the role of Ukrainian intellectual and business elite in the current economic political environment? Well, first of all, my personal attitude to that. I live under the slogan that the crisis is our brand. That's an opportunity, not a disaster. What can we get out of that? Let's see. Everything is possible. Ukraine is the nation of possibilities. We can do everything. We were first to be and producing them space assets. Disregard of when that had happened. Who could think that Ukraine would have Kyrylo with his developments and concepts? That was unclear and very remote following the Second World War, when not all the cities and towns been rebuilt. But that had happened. What can we do? Let's see. So what would be our bet? Kyrylo, one gamer, fair point. Well, let's hope for the best and do what we can do, each and everyone, in recent years. And that's my personal opinion. Probably you may disagree in a majority, but nothing good except arms and armament we were unable to produce. Well, that's my question. What type of economy you may see? And you responded in advance. Transition from a raw-based economy to processing and production and industry. That definitely would be my bet. Am I understanding correctly military high-tech? Well, military high-tech would be a considerable cluster of that. But if we can destroy that, and we can easily destroy that, that would be a felony. We've seen that in 1991 when we inherited the enormous cluster of defense industry, which looked completely different in 2000, not in the best of its shape. And in 2014, when the open war fighting started, we realized that it's gone. Just some memories left. We should not make it happen again. We never discussed the next question. I'll explain a bit to the audience. I talked to someone who is very well aware about Russian modern environment and political environment, who sort of made leak that Medvedchuk in one of the airs was called a stick by which you can touch the shit. So Medvedchuk got his influence and authority in Moscow back. Aren't you sorry that we returned him? I'm not sorry that Ukraine gave him back. That's the fact. Besides, we exchanged, let's say, the real heroes of our modernity, so I will never be sorry. But I never sorry about the past. That's incorrect. We should look in the future and build the future. Why the Medvedchuk for you? What are you going to do with him? No, definitely nothing with him. But what leaks from different sources that still he is considered. Well, Medvedchuk is the person. There is a person, there is a problem. Stop it. Well, probably we already touched all possible and impossible borders in terms of timing. How about memes about Europe being suggested to receive a Nobel Prize in peacemaking. I am not a peacemaker. That's not mine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you in return.